I was at work, half buried in emails and project deadlines, when my phone buzzed on my desk. Just another notification. At least, that's what I thought. But when I glanced at the screen and saw her name, my wife, a strange feeling settled in my chest. The message was short. No more kisses. No more intimacy. That was it. No context, no explanation, just a cold, detached statement of fact. At first, I thought it was a joke. A cruel one, maybe, but still a joke. I even started typing a response, something like asterisk. Ha! What's that supposed to mean? Asterisk. But before I could hit send, something in my gut made me stop. There was no humor in this. I stared at the message, rereading it as if the words might change. They didn't. This wasn't an argument. There had been no recent fights, no emotional explosion leading up to this. If anything, our conversations had been nothing, empty, just routine exchanges about dinner, work, and weekend plans that never actually happened. Still, this was final. This was an execution of something that had already been dying for a long time. I locked my phone and leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. What was I supposed to do with this? Was this her way of saying she wanted a divorce? Was she seeing someone else? Or was she just done with me? I picked up my phone again and typed, "Is everything okay?" No response. 5 minutes. 10. 30. Nothing. I checked the message status. Delivered. She had read it. She just didn't care to reply. Something about that hit harder than the message itself. It wasn't just a word she'd sent. It was the silence that followed. She had made a decision, not just about intimacy, but about me, and she didn't even think I was worth an explanation. I tried to work, but my focus was gone. I went through the motions, answered emails, took calls, but it felt like I was watching someone else do my job from the outside. My mind was back home, in that silent house where my wife had just drawn a line I hadn't seen coming. By lunchtime, I couldn't take it anymore. I stepped outside, phone in hand, and dialed her number as I walked toward the parking lot, straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. She was ignoring me. I sat in my car, gripping the wheel, staring at the blank screen, waiting for a call or text I knew wouldn't come. For months, I had felt her pulling away. I had told myself it was stress, routine, life getting in the way. I had convinced myself that whatever distance had formed between us, we would eventually close it. But this was her closing the door, and now I had a choice. I could beg for an answer, demand an explanation, or I could face the reality that whatever was left of our marriage had just been reduced to a single text message. By the time I pulled into the driveway that evening, I had gone over every possible scenario in my head. Maybe she was upset about something else. Maybe this was just a desperate attempt to get my attention. Or maybe, just maybe, she was sitting inside, waiting to explain what that message really meant. I stepped out of the car and paused. The house looked the same. The porch light flickered slightly, just as it always did. The curtains in the living room were half closed, just like they had been that morning. It was strange how normal everything appeared when inside. Everything had already changed. I opened the door and stepped inside. She was there, sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. The TV was on, playing some mindless show she wasn't even watching. She barely glanced up. No greeting. No acknowledgement. Nothing. I set my keys on the table and took a deep breath. Asterisk okay. Here we go. Asterisk. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Hey," she replied without looking up. That was it. I waited, expecting her to say something, to explain, to joke, to care. She didn't. I stepped closer. "So, do you want to talk about your text?" She sighed, an exaggerated, irritated sigh, and finally looked up. "What about it?" I felt my jaw tighten. "What about it? You sent me asterisk, no more kisses, no more intimacy. Asterisk, that's not exactly a normal thing to text your husband in the middle of the day." She shrugged. I meant what I said. Silence. She went back to her phone like the conversation was over, like this was just another Tuesday. I stared at her, waiting for something, an apology, an explanation, a hint of regret. Nothing. The weight of the room pressed down on me. This was different from the distant behavior I had noticed for months. This wasn't avoidance. This was indifference. And that was worse. I sat down across from her, forcing myself to stay calm. Why? Another half-hearted shrug. She didn't even look at me. I don't feel like it anymore. That was all. No remorse. No sadness. Just a detached statement, like she was talking about a TV show she'd lost interest in. You don't feel like it anymore? I repeated, hoping that saying out loud would make it sound less absurd. She nodded. Yeah. I waited. That's it. That's all she had to say after years together? Something inside me snapped, but not in the way I expected. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even hurt, not in the way I should have been. I was just done. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. Okay. That was my response. Just one word. She looked up, almost surprised, like she had expected me to argue, to beg, to start a fight. I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. She wanted to be done? Fine. I stood up and walked past her, heading toward our bedroom. I didn't slam the door. I didn't curse or yell. I just stepped inside, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at the suitcase in the corner of the closet. I wasn't packing yet, but for the first time, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't staying. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, staring at the half-zipped suitcase. The thought of leaving had taken root, not just because of the message, but because I had finally realized the truth. I had been fighting for something she had already let go of. The house was silent, except for the low hum of the TV. She hadn't followed me. She hadn't asked if I was okay. She hadn't cared enough to wonder what I was thinking. But I wasn't going to let this end with a text message and a shrug. I stood up, walked back into the living room, and planted myself in front of the TV. She finally looked up, mild annoyance flickering across her face. We're going to talk, I said, my voice firm. She sighed and set her phone down. About what? I almost laughed. About what? I crossed my arms. You don't think you owe me an explanation? She leaned back against the couch. I already told you. I don't feel like it anymore. That's not an explanation. I shot back. That's an excuse. She rolled her eyes. What do you want me to say? I took a slow breath, steadying myself. I want the truth. She tilted her head slightly, as if debating whether to give it to me. Finally, she said it. The truth is, I don't love you the way I used to. There it was. Calm, rehearsed, like she had come to terms with it long before saying it out loud. And in that moment, I finally understood there was nothing left to fight for. I wasn't proud of what I was about to do, but I needed answers. My hands felt oddly steady as I grabbed my phone, hesitated for a moment, then opened our phone bill. Scrolling through the call log, I wasn't sure what I was looking for, until I found it. A number I didn't recognize. It appeared repeatedly at all hours of the day and night, late at night, early in the morning, even during lunch breaks. A pattern, a habit, a secret hidden in plain sight. I copied the number and pasted it into a search bar. No name, just a generic carrier listing. No easy confirmation, no instant revelation. For a moment, I debated calling it, but I already knew that wouldn't give me the real answers I needed. Instead, I checked our shared location history. We had linked our accounts years ago, back when knowing each other's whereabouts had been an act of care rather than suspicion. I hadn't thought about it in ages, but now it felt like my last resort. There it was, hotel bars, a random apartment complex across town, not once or twice, frequent, consistent, the kind of consistency that only came with intention. I sat back, phone in hand, feeling a strange sort of stillness settle over me. Not anger, not devastation, just certainty, like solving a puzzle and realizing the image that forms is exactly what you feared. I should have been furious. I should have stormed into the living room and demanded an explanation. I should have shouted, thrown something, made a scene, but I didn't. Instead, I stood up, walked to the closet, and pulled down my suitcase. This time, I wasn't just staring at it. I was packing. Every item of clothing I folded and placed inside felt like severing another thread that had tied me to this place. I wasn't thinking about where I was going, only that I wasn't staying. Footsteps behind me. I didn't turn. "What are you doing?" Her voice was calm, almost indifferent. I zipped the suitcase. Only then did I look at her. Her expression barely changed. Maybe a flicker of surprise, but not enough to mean anything. "So that's it?" she asked, voice flat. I met her gaze, steady and unwavering. "You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." She didn't deny it, didn't feign innocence or ask what I was talking about. She knew, and so did I. There was nothing left to say. I pulled the suitcase off the bed, the zipper humming softly as I secured the last of my belongings. My movements were smooth, controlled, like this had been inevitable all along. No hesitation. No second-guessing. "You're really doing this?" she asked. I didn't look up. "Yeah." She let out a slow breath, but it carried no real emotion, no regret, no sorrow. Maybe a little surprise, as if she had expected me to just accept everything, to keep living in the hollow space she had carved out of our marriage. I grabbed my jacket, slung it over my arm, and finally met her eyes. And in that moment, I saw it clearly. She had already moved on. That should have hurt. Maybe months ago it would have, but now it only made leaving easier. Dragging my suitcase behind me, I walked past her. The wheels hummed against the hardwood floor. She didn't step aside. I had to move around her. When I reached the front door, I paused. Not out of doubt, but to take one last look at the life I was leaving behind. The furniture, the decor, the faint scent of lavender from the air freshener she always used. Everything was the same, and yet none of it belonged to me anymore. "Where are you going?" she asked. The question almost made me laugh, as if it mattered to her, as if she actually cared. I didn't answer. I just opened the door and stepped outside. The air was crisp, carrying the distant sounds of passing cars, of neighbors going about their evenings, oblivious of the fact that my life had just taken a sharp, irreversible turn. I reached my car, tossed the suitcase into the trunk, and turned back toward the house. She was still standing in the doorway. For a second, I wondered if she might say something, anything, to stop me, a half-hearted apology, a weak excuse, some final, desperate attempt to salvage what was left. But she didn't, and that told me everything I needed to know. I climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled out of the driveway without a backward glance. No checking the rearview mirror. No last-minute hesitation. Just forward. For miles, I drove with no destination in mind. The glow of streetlights blurred past. The hum of the tires filled the silence. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. Once, twice, I ignored it. I already knew it wasn't her. She wasn't going to call. She wasn't going to ask me to come back. And I wasn't going to wait for her to. Eventually, I pulled into a gas station, more out of habit than necessity. Stepping out, I inhaled the cool night air, letting it settle inside me. A couple of truckers stood near their rigs. A group of teenagers loitered by the convenience store entrance. The world kept moving, indifferent to my unraveling. I pulled my phone from my pocket and scrolled through my contacts. My thumb hovered over her name. I wasn't sure why. I wasn't tempted to call. There was nothing left to say. Maybe I just needed to acknowledge the finality of it. A name that once meant everything was now just another entry I no longer needed. With a few taps, I deleted it. Her number, our text history, every message, every call log, gone. It was a small moment. Insignificant, maybe, but it was mine. I got back in the car and drove again. No plan, no GPS, just forward. Hours later, I checked into a highway motel. The room was simple, a bed, a desk, a window overlooking the parking lot. It didn't matter. It wasn't home. I set my suitcase down, sat on the bed, and exhaled. For the first time in a long time, I felt light. No anger, no sadness, no regret, just freedom. The morning after, I woke up with a strange sense of clarity. No confusion, no hesitation. The marriage was over. There was no fixing it, no dragging it out with pointless conversations or forced reconciliation. I gathered the evidence I had. Phone records, suspicious locations, late-night calls. It was enough to confirm what I already knew, but I wanted undeniable proof. A private investigator gave me that within days. Photos, timestamps, documentation. I wasn't surprised. I wasn't even angry anymore. I filed for divorce immediately. She didn't fight it, didn't cry, didn't beg. She signed the papers without a second glance. The only thing she asked was when I'd be moving my things out. When I returned to the house for the last time, I felt nothing. The life we built together had become just a collection of objects, stripped of meaning. She watched me pack. She didn't offer to help, didn't try to stop me. I left my keys on the counter, walked out the door, and never looked back. The divorce was finalized within months, clean, efficient, emotionless, just like our last few years together. I walked away with what was rightfully mine. But more importantly, I walked away free. No more waiting. No more guessing. No more hoping for someone to care. She had asked for space, and I had taken mine. Our story had come to an end. If you've made it this far, consider subscribing. It helps more than you know. I've selected 2 other videos I think you'll enjoy. Click on them, and I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.